Welcome back, everybody. This is the Middle-earth in Mercia podcast, episode 19, Mini Madness. As usual, I'm your host, Sonny.
And I'm your co-host, Ash.
And today, as promised, we are absolutely whipping through the tournaments this year. I don't know where the months have gone, but the tournaments are coming thick and fast. So me and Ash have got another double attendance for you to take you through today. And this one's a bit different. It was a GBHL 80 hosted by Dan Garside. And this one, unusually, was a one-dayer with 7 games. So, Ash, why don't you take the viewers through how we were able to play 7 games in just one day for this event?
Yeah, so it was pretty quick and fast setup. So it was 200 points on was it 2 foot by 2 foot board?
Correct.
And it was 45 minutes a round. So, yeah, that's how we managed to fit 7 in. But I think a lot of the games didn't quite reach the 45 minutes. So it was quite quick, a lot of them. And then, obviously, 200 points. There was a model count limit and a bottom end limit on your models as well. I think it was 5 and 26. So, yeah, it was like a quick, fast 45-minute game per round, and so really, it was quite a lot. I guess a unique, fun setup that we haven't done before.
Yeah, so for those of you who haven't played a game at 200 points, it is very different. It certainly feels like a different game, and yeah, the day very much was sort of the Middle-earth strategy battle game speed dating experience. Really, it was quite different. So me and Ash, as we've spoken about in previous episodes, like particularly when we went to Warhammer Doubles, we were sort of aware, okay, this is a very different format, and with the games only taking 45 minutes. We should probably play some practice games and see how this differs. And obviously, there's only so far that can take you. It gets you used to the format, certainly. But obviously, with the huge amount of armies that are out there and such a significant restriction, the term there's many ways to skin a cat comes to mind. There is only so much you can take on board. That said, we did find quite a lot of we managed to play quite a lot of practice games, didn't we, Ash?
Yeah, I think because of obviously the nature of the time frame, you were able to play quite a few games on an evening as well, so we could churn through practice games. We found some interesting things out in terms of the tactics and the way you should build your list.
So yeah, for me, I saw if we move on to list building, and we'll try our listeners to give you the best advice we can on list building at this points level, but maybe we're not the most successful. But I think we could certainly point you in the direction that maybe is. But I sort of started off thinking, shall I play some of my Mordor? And like the points just didn't really sit very well. And then I've sort of considered playing an Isengard force. That's something that I wanted to start off, and I thought almost like a slow grow. Maybe doing 200 points could be the initial step off for that. And it certainly caused me to buy some models, but in the practice games, at least the style of Isengard I wanted to play, I found I was really, really struggling. So that was sort of my first thought. Ash, why don't you tell the listeners your first thought on where you began, and then we can sum up with what we wound up taking in the end.
Yeah, so I originally was looking at taking Malhir and Marauders Urukai Scouts because I thought the additional movement on the small board would be quite a good advantage to have. And I wanted to obviously carry on from Warhammer World Doubles, that I wanted to carry on with that style of list. But yeah, I think playtesting it, we both sort of switched our lists quite a lot compared to what we originally thought we would be taking.
Yeah, so it was sort of about about a week before the event. And at this point, I had played a Far Harad list, which honestly I just sort of knocked up on the back of my hand kind of thing. So that in my games against Ash, he had something different to play against, and I actually went and saw Chris and played some practice games against him as well. And out of the practice games, my Isengard force had 0 success, and my Far Harad force had quite a bit of success. And this kind of took the wind out of my sails, really, for that project. And I was like, okay, the Far Harad force is ready to go. It seems like it's doing a bit better than my Isengard. Why don't I just take that? And then that frees up some hobby time to work on other things. So to sort of finish that trail of thought off quickly, I will very quickly take you through my army list. And that was Mahud Pure or Far Harad, 200 points, 10 models, which gives me a break point of 6, with 5 blowpipes. And that was made up of a Mahud King with shield, war spear and camel, 2 Mahud Raiders, of course, who are on camels, who come with war spear and blowpipe, and they come with a shield at standard, and then 1 Mahud Raider just with war spear and shield, then 3 Mahud Warriors who come with clubs, shields and blowpipes, and then 3 Mahud Warriors with spears and shields. And when the model count is 4 to 26, it doesn't take a genius to figure out that obviously this is on the slightly smaller side, and it did turn out to be the case. I would guess that the average model count was probably 12 or 14, maybe drifted up that way because of some of the more extreme ones. But the average, or is it median? I think probably median is the appropriate, was 12 for sure. But I thought I've got some real hitting power here, which is really hard to contend with. And the Mahud King with shield, war spear and camel for 90 points is absolutely blistering. So that was what I thought with my army list. Ash, what about yours?
Yeah, so my final army list was Ugluk as my leader, and then a couple of Uruk-hai scouts with sword and shield, a couple of Uruk-hai scouts with bow, and then 3 pikemen. And then I also managed to fit a banner in there, which I don't think there was many banners at the tournament, so it was quite unique to have that banner. But through the playtesting, it was quite interesting to see that getting that additional dice roll could sway your luck in terms of how the dice are rolling.
Yeah. Yeah, the banner, I think that did pan out. It was only maybe 1 or 2 other people with banners out of the 28 players, including the ringer. I think, yeah, you were one of 2, absolute maximum 3 of the banners there. So, yeah, I mean, going into it, we both thought, during the practice games, I will say, and this becomes more of a theme, we did very much find, because you potentially, take the Mahud King, he's got 3 attacks, you could be rolling, everybody could be in combat, and you're rolling as few as 10 to 13 dice sort of thing. That, just 4 good rolls could really, really change the force, the direction of a game. So from our practice games, we did sort of have an inclination that the inherent randomness of dice did play a bigger factor in these games. Would you agree that was how you felt going into the tournament, Ash?
Yeah, I think so. And I think you obviously don't have the numbers / the time to let the sort of statistics of dice rolling sort of play themselves out. So it was very much, if the dice were rolling in your favour, then you were going to do well. If they weren't, then it made it a lot harder. Yeah. As we'll see when we come to some of the games that I had. Yeah, and there were remarkable sort of strokes of luck, sort of just finished the game dead within a turn or a couple of turns.
Well, yeah, I also do remember us having one practice game, and like with the camels, it wasn't my Mahood King or anything. It was just a normal camel, and I think I killed 3 or 4 of Ash's marauders in just one charge. And it's like when you've got 12 models, there isn't really a recovery to losing 4 models and no return on it. If you've got 30 models and you lose 4 models in a turn that you weren't expecting, it's certainly not great, but you can come back the next turn. When your opponent has gone from being outnumbered by 2 models to outnumbering you by 2 models, that is a heck of a swing just on a bit of luck, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And then obviously you're getting close to your break point as well. If you've only got 12 and you take 4, you've only got 2 models left and then you're broken. So it just adds that factor in there as well.
Yeah. So I think we've given a bit of context there. The only thing before we crack on with the game reports is that Dan, the TO, he said that they've ran this event as sort of a local end of year thing for quite some time. They're used to the format and they've done their best to basically keep all the scenarios as we know and love them or loathe them. And just sort of make them smaller. So, like, for instance, if you have to be within 3 inches of an objective, it reduces to 1.5. If you need to be if your deployment is 6 inches big, 12 inches big normally, is 6 inches big, and so on. So, that said, let's crack on. What we're going to do is we're going to go through the games 2 at a time. So, I'm going to do 2, Ash is going to do 2, and then we will do a final one each, because I don't think the reports are going to be that intensive, because the games were very quick and fast, like we say. So my game 1, I was very delighted to see that I was about to complete the 3rd round of my tournament face-off with James Patterson. Now, the second round of which I don't think has actually made a tournament report. We didn't wind up doing that one. But basically, me and James, this is James of Great Bear Gaming, we've had on the podcast, friends of the podcast, local TO organizer. We were 1 apiece going into this, so I was actually quite delighted to see myself facing up with him. And the game mode, and this is the same for Ash as well, was Lords of Battle, and this is simply how many kills can your leader get. If you get 3 times as much as the other person, you get 7 points. There's points for breaking, there's points for killing the enemy leader, and so on. Pretty much a straight fight, but keeping a specific eye on your leader. Now, what James had brought was a nice and simple army list. It was a Dwarf King, and it was, I believe, it was either 10 or 12 Iron Guard, however many fits into that. And that was the long and short of his list. Now, we had drawn a Weathertop board, which was very dominating for the table. But me and James both basically said, look, gentleman's agreement, let's fight outside it, because this is just going to be a bit of a nightmare for both of us, because if he goes in the centre, that forces me just to run around messing around with blowpipes to try and gain an advantage before I dismount and go in there. So we agreed to fight outside. Boom, we start the game, I get priority, I send the king immediately into the Dwarf King, I do an impact hit on him. I'd send 2 other camels in. There's not enough to get 3 in there. They do impact hits, no effect. I send the rest of my infantry to make sure my guys don't get swarmed. And then basically begins the trend of the rest of the game. Mahood King wins the combat, slaughters the Dwarf King immediately. So that is pretty much job done. I've won the game. As long as he doesn't table me, I've got 7 points, assuming I get a few more kills, because I think you need to get a minimum of 3 for the maximum. My Mahood mixed, half of them died, lost the camel. Next turn comes along, Mahood King goes into someone, kills them. I think we won priority again, and like sort of a mixed bag from the infantry. Then begins James winning a series of the priority rolls. He starts to whittle down my Mahood. It all comes down to me just having one Mahood left. He's got about 6 Iron Guard left. 5 of them surround the Mahood King. Mahood King wins priority, knocks them all down, kills 3 of them. That's pretty much the game. So the Mahood King just gets the job done. My Mahood, more or less, I think they killed 1, and the Mahood King killed everybody else on the table. So it was all him. Heavy win to me. I'm not sure if we've actually done the pointage correct, but it doesn't matter so much. I've got it down as 6-1. I think maybe that should have been 7-1, but maybe I'm Actually, I think it should have been 8-1. I think because we both broke each other. And I killed 3 times as much, but who cares? For some reason, we've put it as 6-1. Moving on to my next game. This one was even simpler, really. So I was actually playing against Dan Garside, the TO. Never met him before. Really nice bloke. Really nice. And he was a pleasure to play against as the ringer. He had to step in. He was playing a Numenor force, just basically a Numenorian captain on horse, and a load of Numenorians. And he was actually one of the other forces that had a banner, and we were playing Raconteur. So this is where you need to get more models off the other end than your opponent does. And with Might being so tight in this, and he also having a captain/king level hero, he only had 2 points of Might, so he didn't want to spend them. So he actually spent the first 2 turns not coming on while I marched towards his board edge. Then when he did roll to come on, I had already moved first, and I was in a very dominating position. He knew if he came on centre edge, that next turn he was just getting hit left, right and centre with camels. So he came on in the corner, and that was more or less all she wrote. He stayed in that corner. I won priority and a roll off the next turn. Same story again. Send the Mahood King into the captain. Boom, dead. And then it was a matter of just mopping up the rest of the troops. He did he kept fighting all the way to the end and doing every bit of canny movement he could to try and break through, but it just wasn't enough, and it wound up being a 10-0 win. It should have been a 12-0 win to me, really, but I wasn't smart enough in keeping an eye on how many models I was getting off the board. But yeah, 2 very similar games, really. Mahood King gets into their leader, does the business, job done. So with that being my first 2 games, Ash, why don't you take us through your Lords of Battle and your Raconteur?
Yeah, so my Lords of Battle was against a guy called Sam, and he had Rangers of Mirkwood. And I went into this thinking, okay, this would be quite easy, and yeah, very underestimated the army and the luck of the dice, because in the first turn he managed to kill 4 Uruks with shooting, so that's like just absolutely annihilated my force in the first turn. So, and especially Lords of Battle, when you're trying to get those kills in, you have to just go in and try and attack. But with the elves, they've got a higher fight skill than the Uruks, and they get an extra attack for every Uruk, every extra person in combat against them. So sometimes they were getting those 2 attacks if I wasn't quite splitting them off. So yeah, that game I think lasted about 15 minutes after losing those 4 Uruks. They just fell apart from that. I think L'Oreal, she just heroic combat twice, I think, just to finish off the rest of my army, and got tabled within probably 3 or 4 turns. So there's not really much to say about that. It was a 12-0 loss. And then Raconteur was against the Dead of Dunharrow with a guy called Chris. So yeah, this one I managed to get 3 of my Uruks off the board. What I didn't realise, and here's a learning point for beginners and myself, is once you've got those 3 models off the board, get them to kill as many of your people as you can to end the game, because you've effectively stopping them from getting people off because you're getting down to that 25%. But instead, I was thinking, okay, I need to just stop them from getting off the board. So I was shielding when I probably should have been striking, because then I'm having less attacks and they could most likely kill me because of the Blades of the Dead against the courage of the Uruks. It's not great. You can't charge. I couldn't charge many of them because I was needing 8s on normal Uruks and 7s on Ugluk because of the King of the Dead having Harbinger. So yeah, that one managed to get those 3 guys off. It says here 5-0, but I'm pretty sure I got some points on this game, so I'm not too sure what happened there. So yeah, that was over pretty quick as well, because I managed to get 3 people off, but then he just managed to get a Rider of the Dead off the board and another person off the board, but he managed to break me and also kill Ugluk. So it was actually I think Ugluk actually ran away, so they got the points for that there as well.
So there you have it. That's a bit of a tale of different ends of the gaming hall, isn't it? 2-2, but in opposite directions. So I think I'm correct in saying that we had one more game before lunch. But so we'll take you through the first game before lunch and the game afterwards. So my next game was against Nat Sinclair, who was playing a micro-sized version of the army. I actually faced him quite some time ago. I forget what the event was called, but we played last year, and he was playing a Dark Denizens of Mirkwood, Legendary Legion with the Spider Queen and Razgush and all that business. And what he had taken was the Spider Queen and about 3 or 4 spiders, I think it was, however many that fits in the points. And then, of course, you can't forget that he's able to spawn the broodlings, which is quite smart, really, because it allows you to add 3 more models to your army count without them actually counting towards your break point. So you have to go after those spiders. And he was playing giant spiders, not the rubbish ones that fire the paralyze. And we were playing Hold Ground, which is all about the center objective. So I came on first. I set myself up in a fairly defensive position, and the sort of positioned around it, prepared for him to come from anywhere. Now the terrain on this board was a bit unforgiving for me in that there was quite a lot of ruins and walls, which gave Nat a significant advantage because he could sort of position himself on the other side of doorways, but just fractionally, and then have the ability to just zip over walls. But what he did was that's exactly what he did with the Spider Queen, but with his giant spiders, he actually positioned them on top of the walls, ready to pounce down on me. I got a round of shooting off with my blowpipes. I think I got 1 wound, but nothing else came of it. And then I thought, look, if I allow him to go with the Spider Queen just into my troops, especially the camels, he's just going to hurl them, cause some anarchy, and then we come down to a roll-off. So I sort of positioned my troops somewhat in an inverse V in the hope that he would come in, overextend himself into the Mahud King. Mahud King could survive, and then I could wipe him out. That was sort of the plan, and he went for it. But then what happened was the unexpected. He did his broodlings and everything, and they tied up pretty much everything so that I couldn't get to my king. We did a strike off. I lost the strike off, but then I won the combat. Now, this is where you can really be like, there is extreme luck in this, in that with my strength 5 king, all I needed to do was roll 3 4s. Not impossible, and I only rolled 1, so I did 1 wound to the Spider Queen, and bought myself another turn. What was really unfortunate is, despite having superior dice numbers, I don't think I won a single combat against the giant spiders. I think they all rolled 6s for their dual rolls. They were fight 4, so they were superior there. And then to make matters even worse, I either failed to defeat or failed to kill every single one of the broodlings, meaning that for a second time in the row, when I lost the roll-off, not a single one of my models was available really to come and help the Mahud King, and that was the end of that. Really, he won the combat that round. I think I rolled very poorly. I got like a 4 on my dual roll, and he got a 5. Won it, and then with me being on the floor, gives him 6 attacks. He's strength 6, needing 4s because it's 6 on 6s. He did that quite easily to get the 2 wounds and get past my fate. I think he did 4 in the end, and that was the end of that game. The next game I played was Retrieval, which is a bit like where you're set up on sort of Storm the Camp, apart from there is an item in each other's camp, and you need to retrieve that, surprisingly, given the name. And I don't have his name because he's not put it on Longshanks, but he's down as Clubbers. It's not Dave Clubley, but he was sort of a tournament local and used to this format, and essentially what he was playing was Dwarf King, and then 5 Shield Warden teams and an Iron Guard. So a lot of high defense. And this was a bit of misfortune and a bit of a straight up mistake from me, really. I allowed him to come towards me. I sent my cavalry around the flank, and on the critical turn, he even said, I bet you've placed these further away. I lost priority, and I had placed my camels sort of 4.8 inches away, so just near enough that the dwarves could get in there and duff up my charge. On the front, I sent the Mahud King in, and he just failed to get the business done. I had the opportunity to kill Dwarf King, failed to get the business done, and I think he killed like 2 models. My Mahud killed 1. And that was the end of that, really. All I could really manage to do was deny him victory points, and it wound up being 5-0. So as you can sort of see, there's a bit of a trend. And this is where the luck really comes into it. When the Mahud King goes in and he does his business and he kills the enemy leader, I win. When the Mahud King goes in and he fails to do his business, I lose. And that is a bit of a trend of the tournament for me. So those were my games 3 and 4. Over to you, Ash, for yours.
Yeah, so games 3 and 4. First one was against a guy called Kieran, and he had Iron Hills, and he had some Iron Hills Goat Riders, and then a couple of Iron Hills guys on foot. I went into this with a misunderstanding again of the rules for the Goat Riders. I thought they were a bit like your camels, where they got that impact hit on the charge. But it turned out they didn't, but I didn't learn that until later on within the round, so I sort of tried to stay away from them when really I probably could have been a bit less conservative with those Goat Riders around and sort of take the battle more to the dwarves than I did. We managed to both just condense in the centre of the board. Unfortunately, I lost the roll for the deployment, so he sort of put me in an awkward position where I sort of had to go around the house. So he had like a pretty much straight line, so even with his smaller manoeuvrability, he managed to get in the middle before me, and then it was just a case of I just wasn't able to break through the defence of the Iron Hills, and I just wasn't able to get into that centre until it was too late. Ugluk managed to do a really good couple of heroic combats to just bounce around and kill a few guys, because again the Goat Riders aren't as tough as I was expecting, so they were quite easily got rid of those. But then it was just too late to just get in the middle, and he had his high defence troops just on that objective, and it was just hard to get there. Once I'd lost a couple of guys, it sort of gave him the numbers. So yeah, it ended up being a 5-0 loss again, which in this tournament it's not as bad as it could have been. Again, it's just I was finding the same thing as you. If I was getting the dice rolls, I was able to pull off getting the kills, but if you just weren't getting those dice rolls, especially against the high defense models, it was just like you just churning through the turns, and when there's so little time, it's like, okay, you sort of run out of time towards the end to really make any sort of headway. And then obviously that's 3 losses in the morning, so going into lunch it was a bit depressing. I think I was about ready to go home.
I had to pull him back from the main road. Listeners.
You had to. And then I treated myself to a nice lolly, and came back after lunch and managed to get my first win. So that was good. So that was in the retrieval game. I was playing a guy called Tom. I've played Tom before, so he was already one up on me in our tournament points. I think he's part of the overall community that we see quite a lot, and he's a really nice guy, and it was a really fun game. Neither of us managed to get to the
Was that Tom Rice from the Bears?
It's Tom Eves.
Oh, okay.
And he generally plays dwarves all the time, so he was playing Khazad-dûm. And neither of us managed to seize the prize. But I managed to break him, so that gave me 3 points, and he didn't manage to break me. So there was some great battles going on between him and me, and it was like to and fro, and it was like right at the very end I managed to just kill that one last guy, and he managed to lose the combat that he needed to win in order to stop me from breaking him, and perhaps maybe him breaking me, and it could have swung over way. So it was a small win, but a win nonetheless. So it was good to come back after lunch and get that win in, and the first win of the day. It's just at this point I sort of was looking past trying to do any good, because it was just the luck was just not there with me on those dice rolls, and I hate to blame the dice, but in this sort of format, if they're not with you, it can be quite demoralising when you just can't get those dice rolls that you need.
Yeah, I mean, it is correct that we should always do our best as players. You know, that there is that once in a while game where it's just like, damn, that was outrageous. But I do think that it is worth, with this tournament, really emphasising that luck does play quite a strong part of most of these games. Just because if you are, you know, we'll go into this more deeply later on, but I do think if you are considering going to a 200 points event, you have to go into it with a bit of a pinch of salt. Like, this is a day out. This isn't like a hyper competitive tournament. This is going out and playing 7 games of Middle Earth, and you know, maybe you have a bit of luck with you. Maybe you've brought an army list that it was just working for you on the day, and you come away with a tournament trophy, and you know, you feel good about it. But equally, I think you can see the way this is going for me and Ash, that it didn't end in silverware. I think you should be just as happy when the luck's not been with you and you've had a good day out and you've managed to play seven games. Because, yeah, I don't think this is the kind of tournament to really step away from the table and really be assessing, should I done this, should I done that? Because, yeah, it really is like, I mean, those games 3 and 4, a couple of dice roll here, and it goes the other way. Same for my games 1 and 2. A couple of dice rolls the other way, and I lose those games.
It's just like with the Rangers killing 4 Uruks in the first turn. Yeah. Like, if you run the statistics on that, it's crazy that happened, but it can happen.
Yeah, whereas with a full-size game, and I'm sort of talking 350 points and up, you are able to lean on the odds, aren't you? You're able to push the odds in your favour, and that's where the strategy of the game comes about. Whereas in this, unless your opponent does something truly mad, you're probably not really able to do that, are you?
No, but I was probably the opponent doing those truly mad things.
Well, moving on to games 5 and 6. So I'm on 2-2 at the moment, and Ash is on 1 and 3. And my game 5, I'll be honest, this is going to be probably the shortest battle report I ever give. It was more or less a complete write-off. It was domination, so it's where you're able to place the objective markers. There's 5 of them. And yeah, I was on a lava map with a lot of elevation on it. And obviously, because of the way you have to place the objectives, inevitably a couple of the objectives were up on top of the lava mountain. And I was playing Stuart Ingram, lovely guy. I do really have to say, being as I'm about to absolutely lay into this game as my worst game of the day, he was by far one of my nicest opponents of the day, so it in no way reflects on Stuart whatsoever. But yeah, it was just a simple fact of he had an all-infantry army, he outnumbered me, he had a lot of bows, and to make matters worse, I had to deploy first, and I sort of tried to split my force a little bit, but obviously there's no point putting like 140 points of camels onto a cliff face. So they had to go on the flats. And I don't blame Stuart whatsoever. It obviously was more or less game one when he did it, but to do anything else would have seriously compromised his opportunity to win. So he went on the top of the hill with 90% of his force and all but one of his bows. And yeah, the game pretty much was just me getting shot to pieces, my infantry trying to do their best to assault the cliffs. My highlight really was I sent the king up there, and I might have killed Denethor. I know I got into combat with him, but yeah, the king went up there, lost his camel, and did some business basically. And it wound up with him having 2 objectives. So I didn't injure Denethor because otherwise I would have had more points. Him having 2 objectives and me having 1, and it was a 3-6 victory to Stuart. And to be honest, I was lucky to cling on to those 3 points. I do have to give massive credit to Stuart. He allowed a bit of flexibility in the rules in terms of like the lava and stuff, so that we could try and make it somewhat of a game, but I think both of us had enough experience sitting down, and me having to deploy first knew that it was only really going to go one way. So yeah, a bit of a victim of the board there. And then moving on to my game 6, this was a contest of champions. Oh wait, no, it's Lords of Battle on that first one. That was army kills, wasn't it? And Contest of Champions is where it's individual heroes, isn't it, Ash? Yeah. So ignore about what I said about the game with James earlier. I think the scoring was right. So my next game, and I'm sorry, James, to name drop you, and then also say game 6 was probably my funnest game of the day. It was a rematch with the mighty Joe Gonzalez, Gibraltar's finest. Last time I played him, it was a top table game, and he played a very good game, beat me, and went on to win the tournament, and I wound up coming second. However, this was not a top table bash. This was me and Joe battling it out in the cellar of the tournament. And Joe had brought Kingdom of Khazad-dûm, very similar to some of the other lists, Dwarf King, really unsurprising, and a load of dwarves. He had a few rangers in there with throwing axes and things like that. And this was just a pretty much straight battle. And it wasn't just that I was playing like a friend of mine. It was that I think this is the format when it's at its best. Like, there was a turn where he kills 2, I kill 2. The next turn, I kill 1, I kill 1. It felt really swingy. Is it going to be his? Is it going to be mine? All the way through, all the way right up to the end. It was a real sort of nail biter. And it came down to, I think he got 3 kills with his leader, and I got 5. So it was pretty close all the way down to the line. Once again, the Mahud King doing his business, getting 5 kills out of an available 13 dwarves. So pretty impressive. I even managed to do a wound on the dwarf king, but he managed to sort of back up out of it. So yeah, this was a 200-point game at its finest, really. Like all the other ones, I would say it either really felt it was going my way or it really felt it was going the other way. This was my first game where there was that real tension and swinginess that you kind of get from 350-point games, to be fair. I think that if you're going to play like small-scale battles, I probably do more lean towards that. Because you're able to have enough numbers that it's not devastating when you have a bad turn. It's just like, ooh, where's it going? But yeah, a great game against Joe. Wound up being a 5-1 victory. So out of the 6 games you've heard from me, where does that leave me? That left me on 3-3, didn't it? So over to you, Ash. Let the viewers know, did your fates change in games 5 and 6?
No. So, game 5, I was against a guy called Tom, who had a Mordor list with a Ring Wraith, a couple of Black Numenorians, and then a couple of Morannons with Spear. I think this was probably the one list I didn't really want because of the whole fear thing with the Harbinger. Uruks are just not very high up on the courage level, which I don't know, that's surprising. I would have thought they'd be a bit higher than they are based on the sort of theme in the films, I guess. But yeah, so it was obviously you had to go and dominate the board. Unfortunately, I got stuck in between 2 buildings because he placed some Black Numenorians at one exit and some Black Numenorians at the other exit. Obviously, I have to take courage tests to charge them, and I just, for the life of me, just couldn't pass those courage tests. Needing 8s, it's when the odds are against you, it's just impossible to try and get those charges off. So I sort of had to see if he would charge me, and sometimes he would, sometimes he wouldn't. It was very back and forth. I thought I was just about to turn the game round. I managed to break through on one side, and I was about to break through on another side. He sort of made a bit of a mistake where he managed to use the Witch King to transfix Ugluk, but I had 2 spear supports. They managed to kill the 2 guys that he charged into Ugluk, hoping to kill Ugluk. So that opened up the sort of the path for Ugluk to go through, but I then lost the heroic move the next turn. He won it. He managed to use the Ring Wraith, transfix Ugluk, and he was just stood in this little door-like passageway, so no one could get through on that side. And there was just one orc just stood there on his own on the objective, and I just couldn't get through because Ugluk was just stuck there. So yeah, it was just a case of him he just managed to just block me in with having that fear behind him, so I couldn't really do a lot unless he charged me, which he didn't charge me that often, as you wouldn't, because why would you on a game where you're just trying to sort of hold the ground. So it ended up being a loss, and it was a 5-1 loss. So I managed to get a point, but not get the win there. So I took that one with a bit of a pinch of salt. There was probably some errors in the way I deployed at the beginning. I probably shouldn't have tried to hem myself in. I should have put the force maybe in a bit more of an open position, but it was a very difficult map for me because there was a lot of buildings in the way, and having the Witch King sort of installs that fear, doesn't it, that he can just take your leader out or start taking wounds off your leader very easily without you being able to get to him. So yeah, that was just not a lot to say on that. It was just very one-sided until maybe I managed to break through, but then it just didn't have enough time. Then the next game was against a guy called Chris, and he had Easterlings, and he had an unusual leader that you don't really see leading Easterlings a lot. And he has the special rule of that magic where he can sort of send like a shockwave through the ground.
Rutabi.
Yeah, Rutabi, that's the one. And I was a bit worried by that, but then again, the luck was with me this time and against him, and he just didn't manage to get those rolls where he needed to be able to pull that off. And it just turned into a bit of a bloodbath. And I ended up winning this one 12-0. It was just a very fight game because obviously Ugluk needed to get those kills. Once Rutabi's gone, he can't get those kills. I managed to break him. I managed to get loads of kills with Ugluk. And it just, I think it was a really fun game. He was a really good guy. He was actually really helpful and sort of gave me tips that was good against him, which is very rare. You don't normally see that. He was saying, normally people are trying to force you to sort of do you banner combat first if you're going to make that mistake, whereas he was like, no, don't do that combat first, you want to do this one first. So it was a good learning curve. He seemed like he had a bit of experience as a player. It was just, again, the luck was just not with him, and I think...
What was his name, sorry?
Chris Soper.
Chris Soper. Yeah, I do think it's worth shouting out when someone's shown exceptional sportsmanship like that, because
I think he went over above exceptional with that. He just knew that the scenario wasn't for him because Rabutai isn't the best killing machine that the Easterlings have.
Well, particularly at a GBHL 80 when you've got, three losses at that point?
Yes.
Yeah.
Four losses.
Four losses. You know, you're playing for fun and you're playing for honour, really. That is, shout. Was it Martin? Sorry,
it was Chris.
Oh, Chris. Sorry, yeah. You can tell we're recording this towards the end of the day. Shout out to Chris, though. That sounds like a gold star for sportsmanship if there ever was one.
Yeah, definitely, and it was a really enjoyable game. Not because I was winning, but just because it was just a good game. And then we're going to move on to the next one together, aren't we?
Yeah, so my final game 7, this is also a bit of a simple one. I won't really chalk this up to, luck or whatever. I think, to be honest, I think Martin played, so it was against a chap called Martin Seed, and he was playing an Angmar force, which long and short of it was Glothin Bull on Warg, a pretty rubbish orc hero, to be honest, and a ton of wargs, like a ton of warg riders, I wouldn't necessarily say it's a great list, because warg riders just tend to be underwhelming, particularly when they've not got like a truly inspiring hero. But I think, to be honest, Martin just played a tighter game than I did, which, credit to him. He came away with the win. It wound up being 4-7 on Command the Battlefield. And sort of how that came about was, I think I should have just, really made an effort to hide my camels, and I didn't make as much of an effort, and I should have just... Let's do loads of blowpiping until I've taken out enough wargs that you come to me, really, and then I charge you with my camels, and I probably would have won the game. But as it stands, we were shooting, and I wanted to use the blowpipes that were on my camels, and I sort of lost the camel and was like, ugh, that's a big loss. And then I saw an opportunity to go in, and I took it, and it probably wasn't as big a opportunity as I estimated at the time. It just I killed a lot of wargs, but it just kind of went Martin's way. He rather smartly realised he didn't really have the means to deal with the Mahud King when he was on camel, so when he did win a combat, he didn't aim it at the Mahud King. He just took out his camel, and then that sort of stopped him really getting the business done against the remaining wargs. Cannily took him out of the game. I was lucky to wind up with the 4 points, really. But I just think in this game, there's reasons for it, but the long and short of it is Martin played a better game, and that's why he wound up winning 7-4 on that, making my total for the day 3 wins and 4 losses. So, Ash, take the viewers through your 7th and final game.
Yeah, 7th and final game was a guy called Gale, and he had Dolguder. And so his leader was is it Keeper of the Dungeons or something like that?
Yeah.
And I just didn't have anything to counteract that model, because that model was an absolute beast for the points. And he had quite strong what are they called? what are the orcs called from The Hobbit?
Oh, Hunter Orcs.
Gundabag Orcs.
Oh, Gundabag Orcs.
Yeah, so he had a smattering of those, and a spider. So, yeah, it was just... This was an absolute bloodbath against me. The keeper of the dungeons just was absolutely annoying everything, and as he kills more things, he gets more special rules, like causes terror. I believe he gets... and it gets a might point back as well, and all these stuff. So it was just, I just didn't have a strong enough hero that could counteract that. So he just managed to just tear through the army. The Hunter Orcs managed to get some good shots off. And it was just, I got cornered. It was on the lava board, one of the lava boards. And we actually played it as if the lava was there. So that sort of trapped me on an island at one point. Uglut got stuck on top of a mound. He couldn't jump off. He kept failing the rolls to jump off. And it was just total carnage, and ended up losing that one. I think it was 5-1. Didn't manage to do a lot in that game. It was over pretty quick, about 15 minutes again. So it was, a fun game. Again, what was the scenario again? It was...
I've closed the thing.
It was.
Why have you done this to us?
Yeah.
It was Command the Battlefield, so that's the one where you have to take the quarters.
Yeah, so as soon as I'd lost the troops, and he had the spider, so he could move over to one point, he took another point, and then I had to sort of try and stick together just to be able to counteract the strength that he had in those numbers, and it just, it didn't work. I think his spider had that special rule where it can fire. It's got sort of a bit like a throwing weapon, but it paralyzes people, and then you have to roll the dice to unparalyze yourself. I think he did that on a couple of orcs, and I just couldn't get them out of that state. So it just, it was a bad day, a bad game to finish a bad day, I guess.
I think you took the losses too seriously in this, mate.
I mean, I should be used to them by now.
For me, I think this was the worst performance I've had at a tournament for quite a while, and I really didn't let it bother me because I went into this one really thinking, look, this is just a day out. If I do really well, I do really well. If I lose all my games, I lose all my games. I just think at 200 points, it is played so rarely. So we don't, unless you were going to take the absolute blindingly obvious and be boring or try and break the format, there's no way you can really go there and be with every confidence, this is definitely going to do well. So I think you have to go in with it with a pinch of salt. And I think when somebody hosts, I want to get onto this topic in more depth after we've done the scoring. But if somebody hosts a 200-point GBHL 80 tournament, 200 points, that is clearly meant to just be like a fun day. It's not a truly competitive tournament, in my opinion. That's what it's meant to be. And
I think it's still nice to win, though, isn't it? And get those wins.
Of course. But I mean, if I had come first in this tournament, I would obviously felt good and been like, oh yeah, happy. But
I wouldn't have counted it.
Well, yeah, that's what I mean. Like for my first win, I'd like it to be a tournament that I feel I have taken victory and I have won this myself. Not I've had a lucky day. Or I've taken a jank list to a fun tournament. That's my opinion. People are entitled to say, oh, well, it's just because you came 3 and 4. But that's what I think. And I think talking to a lot of the other attendees, that's the attitude most people went into this with.
I think they said that they do it for their annual Christmas sort of get together, and it is a bit of a fun game. I think we'll go on to the scoring, and it was very well run event,
Yeah.
and it was good fun. It's just you go to these things hoping that you can do something like win more than you lose. I know we've got a 355 coming up next, so that'll be interesting to compare the two. But yeah, it was good fun, but another tournament like it, I don't think so. I think
let's save it
more
for
of a thing you play with your mates.
Let's save it for the tournament score. And I've got a topic I definitely want us to talk about, and I know we want this to maybe be a bit of a shorter episode, light-hearted, some might say, just like the tournament. But any sort of topics that are left over, we can discuss at the end. So, firstly, as those of you who are familiar with the podcast will be aware, we have 5 categories for scoring, and the first of which is communication, timings, and organisation. One sentence answers, Ash. I can't really fault them on this, and for me, a default score for that is an 8. I think you have to go above and beyond to get higher than an 8. Do you think it deserves more, or are you happy with that?
No, I think I'm happy with an 8. I think, really well run.
Yeah, Dan was really great with communication.
It was Dan and someone else was helping him, wasn't he? Joe.
Yeah.
So, and those two, hats off to those two, because they did a good job at timing.
Yeah, very active on Facebook in the run-up to it, responsive to questions. Tickets were on sale miles in advance, and they were available throughout the day if you had any issues. Next up is location. It was just near Oxfordshire, really, wasn't it? Sorry, we're not from that area.
It was the south of Oxford, I think, in the Cotswolds, Dorchester on Thames, I think it is.
Yeah. So it, not to put it down or anything. I've said before, like budget tickets require a budget location, and as long as it's clean, as long as it's got basic facilities and good lighting, tables, that's nothing really to turn your nose up. So on location, I do feel like there's a limit to what you can give for a village hall. Like I say, I'm not putting that down, but for me, I'm thinking maybe a 6.5. It was a little bit more difficult to get to than most places, and I do think if you were coming particularly further north from Coventry, it might be a bit of a pain to get there. What do you think, Ash?
Yeah, I think I was going to say a 6. There's not much more you can do with a village hall, is there?
Yeah. So, all right, I'll defer to you on that, and we will go with a 6. On to rules pack and tables. This is a difficult one because, I obviously had a table that I am just like, that cost me the game, and I had a second table which could have been a pretty unpleasant game, to be honest. The rules pack, I like it as a fun thing, but like you, I would probably play these games more with my mates rather than bother going to another tournament, if I'm being brutally honest.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's something you can play on an evening to get some good games in or have a laugh. I think in terms of the tables, I think considering it's not a normal format for a game, I think you can tell they do it quite often because I think the tables were quite well laid out in terms of it wasn't just a mat with a bit of masking tape on it to mark off the board. It was an actual 2x2 board.
Yeah. So there's rules pack and tables. What sort of score are you thinking for that then, Ash?
I think I'm thinking a 7.
A 7. Okay.
You're gonna go lower, aren't you?
I'm gonna knock it down ever so slightly to a 6.5.
Okay.
Just because, like I say, for a tournament, I'm not a super fan of the format now, having played 7 games from it. But I do think that any lower is probably doing a bit of an injustice to how well they ran the event.
Yeah.
All right. On to cost, awards, and prizes. I think it was like £17.50 for a ticket. Lovely trophies. I really like. If there was one thing about wanting to win a trophy, it was that I actually really, really liked the wooden trophies that Dan had made. It had everything you expected: wooden spoon, best sporting. Everybody got an opportunity to put their army out. I can't really fault it on cost, awards, and prizes, Ash. I'm feeling another 8, which is the threshold, as we always say. Very, very good, and you really have to go above and beyond to get more than an 8.
Yeah, I think an 8's fair. We forgot to mention my honorary mention for painting as well.
Oh yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Sell yourself now then, Ash.
Yeah, well, got the honorary mention for best army, didn't I? So it makes up from the saw that we got from Warhammer World, where no one thought we had the best army. Maybe it was just your part of the army that was letting me down.
I don't know if that came across, but I was trying to applaud you, Ash. And also play the world's smallest violin at the same time. So
I've got to do something right at these things.
On to extra factors. So this is just our general vibe about it, walking away, how we feel, friendliness of the TOs, how well put together it was, whether we would recommend it in general. I do feel like, that was a nice day out, but I'm probably not looking to go again. So that pulls me a bit lower. But then I do think, like, what did Dan do wrong? Nothing really. So I'm hesitant to give it less than a 7. What do you feel, Ash?
Yeah, I think, like you say, they didn't do anything wrong. Really nice guys, really well run. I think it's just not something for us, I guess, as a tournament. I think if people want to go, and it's maybe a good one for your first tournament because it is a relaxed sort of vibe. No one's really taking anything that's too serious. I know there was maybe a couple of lists that we thought maybe
we'll go on to that in a minute.
Taking that, but yeah, I think as a beginner it'd be a good one to do as your first one because it's a fun tournament. But for us, I don't think I'd go to one again. But yeah, I think I agree with your rating. They didn't do a lot wrong. That's the only thing that sort of like you feel it should be more, but then the format just wasn't really for us.
I think
so it's just our personal opinion.
Yeah, I think on the off chance, if you're listening, Dan, it's not you, it's us. I do that is the best way to put it, really, is like they didn't put a foot wrong. It's just it wasn't quite for us. It wasn't quite what we were looking for. I'm glad we went, and it has introduced us to like what's a game we could very quickly play in an evening format, but as a day out tournament, it's just not quite for us. And I think the score reflects that a very well organised and implemented event, and that score comes out as a 7.1 for Dan Garside's Mini Madness. Look out for it next year. Look out if he decides to open up the Christmas event. This may be the event for you. It just wasn't quite for us. Closing thoughts on that, Ash?
Yeah, I think if you do a Christmas tournament, then it'd be good fun, but yeah, just not for us. So,
that said, placing the tournament to one side, the topic I wanted to spend maybe about 10 minutes talking about, Ash, and then we'll close up this episode for our listeners, is to propose the question based on a couple of things that we saw. Is there such a thing nowadays as a relaxed GBHL 80? I think when we first attended a GBHL 80s last year, when they were when they were first sort of introduced to the league, there was a massive marked difference between attending a 90 and an 80 in terms of the type of lists you see. And I think that this one was quite the reason it's prompted me to sort of talk about this is I think this one was quite an extreme example of people really going above and beyond to really push the envelope on the format. And the reason I say that it was really above and beyond is people were talking about it, and I don't think it helped that at least one of the players that people were talking about their lists, there was a bit of a bad vibe in the room about having to play that player. I think with 7 people throughout the day having to play the individual, it seemed to me that there were quite a few people that had played that individual that were saying it was a bad experience. And I do think when you go to a 200-point event and you've gone as far, I think this person had something like 26 models in their army. And it's like, you've really gone out of your way to think of, right, what is the army I can bring that gives me the maximum numbers? And with the median amount being, like I say, 12, it immediately gives you a significant advantage. And that combined with there being a bad rumor in the room about playing that person, obviously it had a significant effect on a number of people's days. And then, like, we can also just jump to, like, you know, and I'm trying not to name names, but people are going to figure out, you know, bringing Azog Hunters to this tournament. You know, that is a bit like, well done. You've brought the ultimate meta you could come up with at this points level. Congratulations. You're probably going to do well because you've got 12 2-attack models. And 2 heroes. So that is kind of me throwing out some thoughts there, Ash. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I agree with you. I don't think there's such thing as a fluffy tournament anymore, as they would say. I think people go to these things wanting to win, and sometimes people go to them because they just want to have a good time, and 80s are, to me, I don't think they need to exist because people are starting to play them like a 90. But you're seeing a lot more competitive lists there. Like you said, at this one, there's a couple of people who obviously went to win it and took the list that they can to maximise it. And I guess if you think about it, that is the whole point of going to a tournament, to win it. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of like maybe a change. Maybe they need to get rid of an 80 and just have 90s because, like I said, people are starting to play them like a 90 because people are going to take in meta lists. Whereas I think when we first went to a few 80s, it was a bit more of a fun event. There was sort of like themed lists. You don't really see themed lists as much as anymore. I think people are obviously trying to just maximise everything they can to their advantage. And obviously I wouldn't say it's the majority of people. The majority still go to these things to have fun, but I guess the majority of people go to these tournaments to have fun anyway. But there's always going to be that minority that are in it to win it, and I think in terms of someone giving you bad vibes, I think there should be some form of complaint system where people are brought up on this, because people are paying money to go to these events to have fun. Yeah, take the best army you want, take meta, but play the game in a way that's enjoyable for everyone.
Yeah, I do want to say, because we've not named names, and we've never made a statement like this, and it is unfortunate that, you know, people may be able to figure out who I'm talking about, and I'm not looking for a public caning here because this isn't in the public domain. It's not known by wider people, but I think you'll agree with me, Ash. I have never seen a response like that ever at any tournament we've ever attended. There were clearly a number of people that were like, I've played this person, really hope you don't have to play them, mate.
Yeah, I don't think we've been to somewhere where there's been a person that people have highlighted.
Not to that extreme.
No, not to that extreme, and not so many people, and not pretty much everyone that's played that person.
Yeah, I think it was a combination of 7 opponents in one day, and their list was particularly you've sat down and really thought about how you can, bring out the best army you possibly can, can't you? And the reason I wanted to talk about it particularly at this event is because I guess what I'm getting at is, in my view, this was advertised and the rules pack is clearly, this is a fun 80 event. Bring something different. Dan actively encouraged people to bring something different. And I guess what I'm getting at is it enough for TOs to slap a GBHL 80 tag on there and it be a predominantly fun event these days? I don't think it is. I think that if you're not going to be hyper inventive and put something in there that, a real element of luck sort of thing or a real over-the-top theme thing on your 80 event, I think you might as well slap the GBHL 90 pointage on it, because you're going to get a very similar crowd turn up for it. And worse than that, you're going to get a couple or more new players, and they are at a low points event going to get spanked by a Azog's Hunter list.
So yeah, I think there's going to be new players that come in and get spanked and not want to play again and not want to come to a tournament again. So I think if you're holding it as an 80, you really need to think outside the box.
Yeah.
And somehow restrict armies that would be meta at that points level. So, for example, I think maybe 26 models was maybe too high when your average is half of that.
Yeah. I think it would have done this tournament no harm at all to say, buzz off with the Hunter Rocks, they ain't coming, and we don't want to see more than 16 models.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, that was I really hope it's not seen as having a go at individuals, but it's just a trend I've seen. And you as listeners, maybe you'd be right to point out that when I came second with my Witch King list at 5, was it 5? No, it was an escalation, was it? It was going from 350 to 550 that I did play the Witch King. And, maybe that's too far for some people. And I'd be interested to know your opinion on that. I mean, from my perspective, I'd never played the Witch King before. So I was a bit of a noob. You may remember that episode. I was a bit fearful about how that was going to go for me. And for the 350 list, I did play quite an alternative, unconventional Mordor 350 list. So maybe people have got opinions on that, and if you do, I'd like to hear from you. But yeah, to just reiterate, sort of going back to what we used to do more frequently, where we sort of had a topic of the episode. Do you think the friendly GBHL 80 is dead? Do tournament organisers need to do more at the 80 events to promote people bringing alternative lists, to dissuade those people who are looking for a win, and push them towards GBHL 90s? Or is it GBHL 80s mislabeling themselves that should really be GBHL 90s? We'd really like to hear from you. We'd love you to join the conversation. As always, you can contact us at middleearthinmercia@gmail.com. You can message us on Facebook. You can message us on Instagram. But we'd love to get you involved in this conversation. If we do get a decent response, we'll pick it up maybe in a couple of episodes' time. Ash, do you I'm sort of putting my view very much as the topic of conversation there. Do you have any dissenting view on that? What do you think about me playing the Witch King? It was the first time I played it, but was that too much for an 80? Do you think people were saying the same things about me?
No, because I think the Witch King can be very swingy. I think, obviously, as well, that was only half of your list.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not playing that full list for the full day. So, yes, you might have the Witch King in the afternoon, but I think the Witch King isn't enough for a meta list. I think the Witch King takes a lot more skill to play as well. I've played the Witch King many times and I've not always lost because the Witch King is there, if you get me.
That's
so
true.
I think, whereas playing things like Hunter Orcs, and other meta lists that I've played, it's like, okay, these are just, you may as well just not enjoy the game. And
I think one of the reasons people do often bring up Hunter Orcs is because it's a very low skill list. Like, everybody's got 2 attacks, you know. It's very hard to rob you of that significant advantage. You know, what do they cost? Like 8 points, if that. You've got strength 4, 2 attacks. Nobody can take that advantage away from you, really, can they?
No. And I think it's obviously like having covering model on foot.
But at half the cost.
Yeah, at half the cost, and you don't need to charge to get it. So yeah, I think I don't think the Witch King is meta on its own. I think maybe when you combine it with Suladin and build that list out, then maybe that's when the Witch King becomes a lot more powerful. That Mordor alliance, I think is where the meta list is, but I don't think just having the Witch King with your army isn't enough.
No, I
but
mean,
people
I think
can obviously correct us and say how we're wrong and slag us off and
email
us with angry rants.
Yeah, if we're going to put the question out there, we have to be willing to have some stuff thrown back at us, and that for me, I think, you know, maybe was the biggest question people might be able to ask. But one of the reasons I brought this up is because in the next episode that we'll be doing, which hopefully Ash can attend, but it was a tournament attendance by myself, and it was also a GBHL 80, and I brought what I thought was a good list, but it certainly isn't a meta list. It's not in people's top 10 meta. And at that event, there was, and like I say, we'll come back to this topic in the next episode. But at that GBHL 80 event, there was every meta list you could imagine at that points level. And that's really what, together with this one being a really friendly one, where there was a couple of like egregious sort of looking lists, it just really did pop in that question in my head. Is the friendly GBHL 80 dead? And like we say, are they being mislabeled, or do TOs need to do more to dissuade competitive players from attending those events? So please do get in contact. We will, like I say, we will pick up this topic again. Maybe me and Ash will have some fresher thoughts on it. I'm going to tell him the ins and outs of what went down at that tournament. But to round things back quickly to the event, this episode has been all about Dan Garside's Mini Madness GBHL 80 event. Like I say, not for us in terms of a tournament, but interesting format, and ran by some truly nice and friendly, approachable TOs. And if they play a slightly different format, I'll certainly be keeping my eye out for it. What about yourself, Ash? Any closing comments?
No, yeah, I think really well run tournament, and it's given us inspiration to have some games on an evening. We can play the 200 points games on an evening and with a couple of people, get some games done. And I think, yeah, like you say, if they do another event, definitely up for it. But maybe if it was a bit closer to home, I think we've been a bit spoilt with games at Balding Brum and Black Dragon, and yeah, so it's nice to have those games on our doorstep. It was nice. Maybe it wasn't nice to have a day out, and it was a nice village. But yeah, really good event, and definitely recommend if anyone sees those two TOs doing an event to turn up and give it a go.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, please make sure that if you are listening regularly and you're enjoying the podcast, that you give us a click and a follow, and you give us a review on your podcast of choice. It really does help us out in terms of growing the podcast and getting more of you engaged with the conversation. Ash, do you want to say the line about YouTube?
Yeah, make sure you like and subscribe.
Yeah, we're trying to make sure that as we're experimenting with cameras and things, not in that way, get your mind out of the gutter. We are trying to put more content out on YouTube, and we're trying to grow the community over there as well. So that really does help us, giving us a like and subscribe over on YouTube. But yeah, that's all I have from myself today. Like I always say, I hope you find time for the hobby and time to throw a few dice with friends. Over to you, Ash.
Yeah, catch you all later, everyone.
Cheers. Bye.